All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you're having a wonderful day. It's a lovely, lovely Friday evening, and it's good to be here with you all. Thank you very much for being here. So, today, excuse me, please. Okay. All right, so today we're going to be revisiting a conversation we had a while back, and I'm sure we're going to have a great time together. For those of us on TikTok, please power tap, let's like the live and also share. Thank you very much. For those on Facebook as well and YouTube, please like the live and share. Thank you for the 2K likes on TikTok, by the way. It's really beautiful to know that folks were power tapping. But please don't stop. Thank you very much. All right, so I see a question before we even get into today's conversation. I see a question on YouTube, so whatever. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. I think it's an Igbo name or something like that. But yeah, you wrote something in the comment section, and I think it might be a good place to start. And just in case you didn't see, let me read to you what Kingsley wrote there. He said, "Are you old?" Why not just write it in Igbo language so we can at least try? Because this is your Igbo now fire. Anyway. Says, are you older than, so I think it meant, are you older than Babangida, who at time was at the military, who was clarified that it was not, boy, okay, I mean, to be honest, you are not Oyinbo, so it's okay. At least I understand what you're trying to say. So when you discuss history, nobody cares about how old you are if you are talking nonsense. It's about the truth and the facts of the matter. So my age doesn't even, number one, I'm not as young as I look, but even if I tell you my age, doesn't change anything, because of course I was not born at the time of the coup. So my age doesn't even count to start with. That's one. Number two, the thing about most of you is that you've never read IBB's book. If I ask you right now, what's the title of that book, I can assure everybody listening right now that this person would not be able to tell you the name of the book, let alone read it. So the thing is, you haven't read the book, and I will quote a portion of that book right now. The book is called The Journey in Service, and IBB actually said the push or coup took on an unmistakably ethnic coloration. That's what he wrote in his book. It was vacillating and provocating when he was talking about the fact that some people say it was an Igbo coup, some say it was an Igbo coup. They went to bring out Awolowo. People were saying all kinds of things, but guess what? I'm not even really know so much about it because I was very young and I was a young officer. Then he said, then he got to the point where he was talking about how they killed the Sadauna, and then he said that the coup took on an unmistakably ethnic coloration. And then he went on and said, oh, but they said this is what they were planning to do. But then again, this might be the view of a young officer looking at things from a distance. That's what he wrote in his book. So no, IBB did not exonerate Igbo people. As a matter of fact, he actually affirmed that the coup took on an unmistakably ethnic coloration. But here's the thing. Why are you guys afraid of responsibility? And you're saying, you know what? Our fathers did it, they messed up, and that's okay. You know, I'm sure they must have learned the lessons, but guess what? We're even sorry that happened. But you can't say sorry because you were condemned to be victims of Nigerian story. So to say sorry means that you're taking responsibility for something for the first time in your life. And in this country, you have never said sorry, even though you've done many terrible things. So what sane people do is they see what the folks have done, they acknowledge it. It doesn't mean that you are bad people. It just means that, you know what, we're going to learn from this and grow. But no, you would not do that. You just look for a way to, continue shouting it was not an Igbo coup. Number one, today's topic has nothing to do with Igbo coup, so I don't know why you even brought that up. But to be clear, it was an Igbo coup. And even IBB that you're quoting said in his book, or wrote in his book, the coup took on an unmistakably ethnic coloration, and he was talking about Igbos when he used that phrase. So maybe you should read the book before you go around dancing naked in the streets. May God bless you and give you, understanding. It was an Igbo coup, just like the July coup was a northern counter coup. You would never say northern and say it was not northern. You would never say nothing and say, oh, don't call it a northern coup, don't call it a northern coup. Someone is going to destroy my life if you tell us the truth. You don't hear them say that. They know they did it. And even the kids will not tell you that, oh, it was our fathers who did it. We did not do it. Everybody knows it was a northern coup. And the northern counter coup was a northern coup. And that's it. And that's okay. Does that mean you're going everywhere telling northerners that they are bad people? It's history. You guys need to evolve like other humans do. Always crying about the past, and when they tell you about the things that you don't have, you'll be shouting that. Anyway, let's go to today's topic. Let's not spend time on frivolities, because I think this is actually unnecessary. Omo Yoruba says the Northerners owned up to it. Yes, because they are more evolved culturally. They understand that it's in the past, it has happened, and to be fair, even if you want to be, you can even brag about it because they won. Unlike the first guys who were able to hold on to power for 6 months, they were there from 1966 to 1976. 10 years. Gowon and then Murtala Mohammed. 10 years before Obasanjo then took over. So maybe they understood, to be honest, the Northerners understood, they understand power more than folks from the East. And it's not because they are better, it's just because they had evolved politically long before the British arrived. Unlike those who are trying to understand what politics actually means, with the arrival, not even with the arrival of British, even right now in Nigeria, they're trying to understand what politics is. Because if you really understand what politics is, and people say you messed up in the past, you don't say, oh, I didn't do it. Especially if you did it, you own up, and then you might even become the ally of the person you hurt in the past. Right? You just acknowledge it and you move on. But for some reason, it takes some people I was going to say a while, but it looks like it's going to be decades or centuries to understand basic things. May God bless you. All right, so today's topic, Awolowo on trial, why Chief Obafemi Awolowo was tried for treason. We had this conversation last week, but I think it's important to actually listen to the teaching alone, because what we do in our full sessions is that we have the news and then we have all kinds of conversations apart from the main topic. So what we try to do with this replays is to actually focus just on that topic, so that way we're able to zero in and understand, the conversation better. Okay, so that's why we're listening to this today. All right. Again, before we get into this, if you're on TikTok, please power tap. We really need to get the likes up. If you're on YouTube and Facebook, kindly like and share the live stream. Glad to have everybody here. Also, if you're on TikTok, please like and if you're on Twitter, please like and repost. Okay, thank you so much. All right, let's start with description, and then we'll get into the video. I said description because that's what it is on YouTube. So what we're playing, right, is actually on the YouTube channel Busui Oris. A certain writer, drawing from an interview by Samuel Ikoko, created the impression that Chief Obafemi Awolowo was rightly convicted for planning a coup. According to that narrative, his imprisonment was deserved. That claim has circulated for years and it keeps resurfacing. This video goes deep into that writer's argument and the political circumstances surrounding the trial. We examine how political parties were aligned at the time, how tensions in the Western region escalated, and where exactly the allegations of coup plotting originated. When you move beyond insinuation and look at documented actions rather than propaganda, the picture becomes clearer. Awolowo was not jailed for participating in a coup because he did not participate in one. His imprisonment emerged from a calculated political campaign designed to crush him and weaken the action group's influence in the Western region. The two parties at the center of that effort were the NPC and the NCNC. This is about power. This is about strategy. This is about how political rivals eliminate threats. So I'd like you to enjoy this video, Awolowo on trial, why Awolowo was tried for treason. Please power tap and like the live as we listen. We need to get the likes up so that we don't, get out of here abruptly. So please like the live across all platforms so you're going to get to enjoy, this recording. All right, let's get into this. Again, this is our on trial, why Awolowo was tried for treason. Enjoy. Okay, so we're starting a new series today. We're starting this because of a question that was asked last week by a gentleman who was trying to understand, Nigerian history. And he mentioned something that Samuel Koko said. And I thought that, we should spend some time on it. Let's go to the topic of today. We had a conversation last week where somebody came up and asked a question about Awolowo's treasonable felony. Okay, people say it also, like on social media, they say, Yoruba, Awolowo went to prison, he planned a coup, and they throw jabs. Again, not very smart people, but it's what it is. And then he mentioned that he read a book by Max Yolon, where Samikoku said that they went to Ghana, that it was true what they said. So I said, we're going to have a session on it rather than just answer the person and say yes or no. We're going to actually have a series of conversations on this matter. So we're starting a new series today, Awo on Trial, why Awolowo was tried for treason. Thank you very much, Cam, for that comment. So let's start where that gentleman started. And he started by talking about what Sami Koko said, and he talked about a particular book. So I'm going to read that book, then we'll go into other books. Okay? Like I said, this series, Iwema, I could tell you exactly what happened, but I don't think that's not what we do here. We try to actually hear from the people to show you, not just from me. Before people start asking you, were you even there? Let's listen to people who were there. So let's start with Oil, Politics and Violence, Nigeria's Military Coup Culture, and then from there we'll go to other books. Please stay with me. We're going to read a lot of books today, but we're going to have fun. Okay? Let's get into this. Oil, Politics and Violence, Max Yolon. Samuel Koku publicly confessed that the plot was real and that they had attempted to overthrow the federal government by extra-constitutional means. Now, Sam had escaped, by the way, to Ghana. We'll get into all of those things. He escaped to Ghana. And then now he's saying that everything that they said was true. And this is what Samuel Koku said. We were fed up with the way the Nigerian system, the Nigerian state, and the Nigerian government were operating. We were deeply committed to a change of government, and we saw that waiting for elections would not produce any solution to the problem. This is what we did. We started preparations for it, and the preparations, I believe we would have pulled it off. But unfortunately for us, our leader was so kind to the Nigerian police that he had a police informant among his planners, and so the police knew every move we were making. Hold up. So you read this, you don't have to look for the holes to find them. His own statement has holes in them before we even read other books. So he's saying here that the leader, whoever that leader is or was, had a police informant among his planners. And so the police knew every move we were making. How would the police know what you're making? Because you have an informant amongst them. You didn't mention that the informant was caught. You're making it sound like because you have a police informant, therefore the police knew what you were planning. Let's keep reading. So it says says our leader was so kind to the Nigerian police that he had a police informant among his planners, and so the police knew every move we were making, and so it was easy to trip us up. Well, after the act, people have been saying there was no coup because we went to court. There was no plan to overthrow the government. Naturally, if you catch me over a coup plot and take me to court, I have to enter a plea of not guilty. I did not do it. This is normal. Our leader even became the number 2 citizen in the country. I felt it was time to tell the country the truth so that our history would be correct. So all I'm saying is that yes, there was an attempt to overthrow the government. Yes, I took part in the attempt. Yes, it failed thanks to people like MD Yusuf and co. Then Maxilon then writes, Awolowo's incarceration was followed by the perpetuation of the western region of an unpopular government by Chief Samuel Akintola of the NNDP. The western region proved to be battleground and so on and so forth. So here's the point he's trying to say here, that Awolowo was part of it. This man that I was talking was not in Nigeria. He didn't go to prison, by the way. At least not at the same time, because he was in Ghana all the while, but we'll get into it. Now, that's what Samuel Ikoku said. This is what the gentleman that came up here read and said, Ikoku said this. Is it true that Awolowo actually did it? Rather than say what I think, I'm going to read something to you from Ebenezer Babatokwe. He wrote a book called Awolowo's Great Life Battles. At some point in this conversation, you will determine what the truth is. So just stay with me. Let's read together. Samuel Gumsu Ikoku was one of the frontline leaders. I'm reading Awolowo's Great Life Battles by Ebenezer Babatokwe. It says Samuel Gumsu Ikoku was one of the frontline leaders of the Action Group in the First Republic, who ended up as a member of the ruling National Party of Nigeria in the Second Republic. So he worked with NPN, the Second Republic. A very brilliant economist, S.G. Ikoku was one of the students of the famous Harold Lasky, a professor of economics at the London School of Economics. S.G. Ikoku holds a master's degree in economics. S.G. Ikoku's talent as a gifted orator and a radical politician was discovered by Papa Obafemi Awolowo in the early 50s. Awolowo did not waste much time in inviting him to join the Action Group. Ikoku created history in Nigerian politics when he became the first man to contest an election against his own father, the well-known late Sir Alvan Ikoku of Arochukwu in eastern Nigeria. Ikoku created history in Nigerian politics when he became the first man to contest an election. Ikoku created history in Nigerian politics when he became the first man to contest an election against his own father, the well-known late Sir Alvan Ikoku of Arochukwu in eastern Nigeria. S.G. Ikoku defeated his father and consequently became the official leader of the Action Group opposition in the then Eastern Regional House of Assembly. By 1960, Ikoku had become a major force in the politics of the country. His brilliance, his oratorical power, his charm as a revolutionary socialist activist soon warmed his, I'll take that again, his brilliance, his oratorical power, his charm as a revolutionary socialist activist soon warmed him close to Papa Obafemi Awolowo. It is now a part of Nigeria's history that the insistence of Chief Awolowo on having Ikoku as the General Secretary of the then Action Group in preference to Chief Ayorosiji was one of the causes of the Action Group crisis of 1962. We're going to tie everything together, but just pay attention to the things we're saying. Again, he says here, it is now a part of Nigeria's history that the insistence of Chief Awolowo on having Ikoku as the General Secretary of the then Action Group in preference to Chief Ayorosiji was one of the causes of the Action Group crisis of 1962. At the Just Conference of the party, S.G. Ikoku was unanimously elected the General Secretary of the Action Group. He defeated Chief Ayorosiji, who had held the post for many years, in a landslide. Chief Ayorosiji withdrew from the conference and joined forces with the Akintola faction of the party. A major rift within one of the best organized political parties in Africa had thus begun. One of the highlights of Action Group Just Conference of 1962 was the declaration of democratic socialism as the ideological stand of the party. Consequently, the Action Group Federal Secretariat was organized massively along radical lines. S.G. Ikoku contributed immensely to the process of radicalization of the party. Conservative elements within the Action Group who found the new ideological trend of the Action Group as not being suitable for their class positions did not waste time in declaring open war against the party. Late Chief Okunowo from Ijebu-Ode was to later explode on the floor of the House of Representatives that Chief Obafemi Awolowo was now surrounding himself with young, bearded communist rascals. The Action Group crisis later worsened, leading to the declaration of a state of emergency in the then Western region controlled by the party. An administrator, Dr. Koyi Majakodumi, was appointed by the Balewa-led NPC government to rule the region. SG Koko later fled to Ghana to seek political refuge there. As Papa Awolowo himself said, SG Koko came out with a suggestion that action group leaders, please pay attention. SG Koko later fled to Ghana to seek political refuge there. As Papa Awolowo himself said, SG Koko came out with a suggestion that action group leaders should seek refuge in Nkrumah's Ghana. Papa Awo said his reply to Ikoko was a firm no. Awo told Ikoko that it was going to be most distressing. I'll take that again. Awo told Ikoko that it was going to be most distressing news in all decent ears if he, as the leader of the action group, should desert the seeming supporters of the party and seek refuge in a country where he would soon pose a security problem to his hosts. SG Koko disappeared immediately to Ghana that same day. So, in fact, let me explain what just happened. I will still explain much later, but let me just say that after Balewa declared state of emergency in Western region, we're going to get into how that happened. SG Koko advised Awo to flee. Chewe says Igbos are fleeing. Said no, because being the leader of the party, it would be distressing for others to hear that Ogati Salo. So he decided to stay. But that same day, SG Koko fled to Ghana. SG Koko was to be in exile in Nkrumah's Ghana for a little over 4 years. While in Ghana, Ikoko enjoyed tremendous goodwill from the Nkrumah government. Kwame Nkrumah and Chief Obafemi Awolowo were very good friends. Their first meeting was at the 1945 Manchester Pan-African Conference. The conference was equally attended by late Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya and President Kamuzu Banda, the dictator of Malawi. Rich says, like, Ifajina ran, Azikiwe ran, Ojuku ran, Ikoko ran, like it's normal. Anyway, so the writer here is saying that Kwame Nkrumah and Chief Obafemi Awolowo were very good friends. Their first meeting was at the 1945 Manchester Pan-African Conference. The conference was equally attended by late Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya and President Kamuzu Banda, the dictator of Malawi. SG Koko soon became the economic advisor to Kwame Nkrumah. This was besides his being a senior lecturer at the Ideological Institute at Winneba, a beautiful small town on the road to Cape Coast in Ghana, and also the deputy editor of the Spark, a radical socialist weekly of the African Revolution. Madam Maurice says Nnamdi Kanu, but I don't know why they're not winning. So Ikoku goes to Ghana. Both, but it is what it is. Anyway, so Ikoku goes to Ghana, gets to work with Kwame Nkrumah. He was the economic advisor and was also a lecturer at Ideological Institute at Winneba, a beautiful small town on the road to Cape Coast in Ghana. Then he was also the deputy editor of the Spark, a radical socialist weekly of the African Revolution. Following the February 24, 1966 coup in Ghana, which terminated the progressive government of Kwame Nkrumah, the military rulers in Ghana, led by General Joseph Ankara, arrested SG Koko and another Nigerian, Mr. Ayode Banjo. The same Ayode Banjo, the one that... Also an action grouper who had fled into exile following the events of 1962 and returned them to the military rulers in Nigeria. The two men were subsequently detained by the Nigerian military rulers. All right. So, here's what we've learned so far. Here's what we've learned so far. From all politics and violence, SG said that they were going to plan a coup, and that they had a leader, and he was referring to Awo, by the way. And then he said that the leader had an informant, a police informant, and that way the whole of the police department knew what was happening. That makes no sense to me. If I have an informant, it's not like I'm informing the police of what we are doing. I'm getting, intelligence report from that informant. That's the sensible thing that informant will do for you, not to be reporting what we are doing to the police. So I don't know how that actually correlates. But we also discover here that he was part of the people that radicalized the party. I'm not going to blame him for that, by the way, because Awo allowed it. They were trying to become more, radical in their approach to politics. And when things happened, he fled to Ghana. We've learned that so far. Okay. So here's a question. Was there a coup? We're going somewhere. Please stay with me. Was there a coup? Did Awolowo tell them to organize a coup? Now, in order to answer that question, we have to go back just a bit. We're going to read a book by Papa himself, Adventures in Power, Book 2, The Travails of Democracy and the Rule of Law by Obafemi Awolowo. This whole thing about coup, when did it begin? And how was Awo involved in all of those things? So let's start with this stuff. So I bookmarked it. Okay. Now, there were issues in the party already, in Action Group. And if you want to understand how all these things happen, please read this book, The Travails of Democracy and the Rule of Law. But you can also listen to our series on YouTube. You can watch our series on YouTube where we discuss Awolowo and Akintola. Let me start from what happened on 20th September 1960. After a prolonged debate, which lasted till very late in the night, the FEC adopted democratic socialism as the party's ideology and basic policy. The name was suggested by SLA. That's Samuel Akintola. And then we went on to talk about the ideals of democratic socialism. We're not going to read all of that. We're just going to run very quickly. So there were issues between SLA and Papa, and we're going to get into some of those things much later. But I just want to establish something about this whole idea of coups. Okay. Yeah. 19th February 1962. When was this? 19th February 1962. There are no trials. Nobody has caught anybody. Nobody is going on any treasonable felony charge or anything. The first time in my research where I saw somebody actually accuse Awo of planning a coup was not even when the whole thing started. It was somebody that was having a problem with Awo, who was already working with the North at the time in history. And that was SLA. SLA was already partnering with the North. How he did it, why he did it, we'll get into all of those things later. But I just want to make a point about this whole coup matter. So this is 19th February 1962. The governor of Western Nigeria, the Ooni of Ife, Sir Adesoja Aderemi, Oba Samuel Akínsànyà, the Odemo of Ishara, Chief T. Odutola the Ogbeni of Jebode, Chief S. Akintola, Chief Osuntokun and Ogundiran, and I met at the Government House Ibadan to discuss the allegation made by me against Chief Akintola to the effect that Chief Akintola was undermining my leadership with a view to overthrowing it. You know what happened? Now, we've talked about it before. That I was the leader of the party. Akintola was the premier of the region, but Akintola was trying to also take on the role of the leader of the party because Awo was leader of the party when he was also premier of the region. Awo had now gone to the center and it was at the federal level, but it was opposition leader. But he was still leading the party. Akintola had this idea that since he was the premier, he should be able to also lead the party. So it was undermining Awo's leadership, and this is something that all historians agree, on. And we're not yet telling you what happened and why it happened, but I just want to establish the fact that it is true that they were having issues already by this time. Okay, they had the Congress in Jos, where Akintola left everybody to travel to Ibadan to go and welcome Sardauna, which was a huge blow because people saw it in the newspaper in Jos and they were very angry. By the time he returned with Rosiji, people knew, time was up. They had some issues. We're going to get into some of those. I think we should start. I'm talking a lot about these things. I don't think it's right that I'm just saying it. Let's go back a bit, please. Let's go back a bit, just to create a proper basis for what we're discussing. So we're not just talking in the air. Let's go back a bit. Start with 30th January 62. So, of course, they've been having issues before this point. They've had... I'm looking at the best place to start without going too far, because we're still going to go far later. Here's the summary. Awo didn't want Akintola to become premier originally. He never wanted it. The person that would have taken that role died. Okay? And that was Bode Thomas. He died, And so Akintola became the deputy, should I say president of the party, or leader of the party. And when it was time for Papa to go to the center, he then said, he wanted to have F.R.A. Williams or Akindeko or Anthony Nauru. Those were his choices, not Akintola at all. But Akintola sent people like Doherty, sent Alhaji Gbadamosi, a number of people to persuade Awo, and it took a long time before we eventually agreed. I wish he never did, because if he did not, Nigeria would be like Singapore now. And I know what I'm saying, by the way. And it's not because one person is bad or good. It's just that, when actions have far-reaching consequences. But so that has already happened. Akintola was doing all kinds of things. They will hold press conferences. They will reduce the price of commodities like cocoa and things like that. So, we'll talk about that later. Let's just go straight to what happened on 30th January 1962. A meeting federal executive was held at Jos. Chief Oshuntoku and Honorable Adigun challenged my right to co-opt some members into the council. I defended my action by making reference to the party's constitution and to generally accepted practice in such matters. Chief Oshuntoku is the one who wrote the book that we read one time like that was, giving scathing reviews of how, he had his own issues with him. I refer to the presence of Prince Adedoyin at the meeting. He had been invited to the meeting by the deputy leader without previous clearance with me. All the same, I was prepared to accommodate him and regard him as duly co-opted. I warned against the repetition of the ugly and barren disputation which occurred at Ikeja on 18 December 1961. My explanation was accepted and the meeting proceeded. A steering committee of the Congress was set up under the chairmanship of Ayotunde Rosiji. 1st February 1962. The deputy leader, Chief S.L. Akintola, got permission from me to leave Jos for Ibadan on what he described as urgent state matter. He promised to be back on Saturday, 3rd February 1962. He did not specify the nature of the state matter, nor did he disclose to me that he was going there to receive the Sardauna. 2nd February 1962. I delivered my presidential address to the Congress. It was well received. According to newspaper reports, Chief Akintola had gone to Ibadan to welcome the Premier of Northern Nigeria, who had gone there on the invitation of the University College Ibadan to open Sultan Bello Hall. According to information from the principal, which reached us at Jos, Chief Akintola's presence had embarrassed the University College authorities as he had not been expected. Accordingly, the members attending the Congress were in their private conversations critical of Chief Akintola's conduct for the following reasons. I'll explain the reasons later. So what they're saying here is this. They were having a meeting, Federal Executive Council meeting in Jos. Akintola reaches out to Awo, says that there was an urgent state matter that he had to attend to. He traveled from Jos to Ibadan. What he did not tell us was that he was going there to welcome the Sardauna. Now, why was Sardauna in UI? What happened at the time was this. UI had this new hall of residence. It's called Sultan Bello. It's still there. It's called Sultan Bello Hall. So they invited Sardauna to come and open it. Why? Because Sardauna is the grandson of Sultan Bello, the same Sultan of Sokoto. So Akintola decided to go there and welcome him, greet him, whatever. Now the news of what he did gets back to Jos. You see how this thing ties with the coup later. Just stay with me. The news gets back to Jos. People in Jos start getting angry, like, why on earth would he leave the Federal Executive Council meeting of his party to go and welcome the leader of another party without telling his own people what he was doing? So let's go on now. So the people at the Congress were critical of Chief Akintola's conduct for the following reasons. Number one, the Sardauna of Sokoto was not on an official visit to Ibadan. He was invited by the principal of University College Ibadan to perform the opening ceremony of Sultan Bello Hall. Consequently, it was improper for Chief Akintola to leave. He had shown scant respect for the party's highest organ. Number two, the conduct of Chief Akintola made the party an object of ridicule. For while the leader of the party was busy delivering an address, which in part condemned the repressive measures being taken against the opposition by the Northern government, his deputy was at the same time demonstrating his tacit approval of such measures by giving the Premier of Northern Region a state welcome, even when the Premier was not on an official visit to Western Nigeria. What is it saying here? At this point in Nigeria's history, Action Group had a thing for the North. They were like head-to-head, they were headbutting essentially. And so they were criticizing the old feudal system and the political structure of the North. But while they were doing that, the deputy leader of the party was welcoming the leader of the party in the North that was repressing Action Group in the North. So it didn't make sense. Number three, there was an implied but clear suggestion in the conduct of Chief Akintola that he rated the Sardauna higher in the order of political hierarchy than his own leader. The photograph of Chief Akintola and the Sardauna of Sokoto also appeared in the papers. Congress attendants were annoyed and wanted to discuss the action of Akintola, which they considered outrageous, provocative, and contemptuous of the Congress. I ruled such discussion out of order and appealed to members to exercise restraint. 3rd February 1962. Debate on the presidential address began. Chief Akintola arrived back in Jos at 3 p.m. and told me that he was too tired and therefore could not attend the afternoon session of the Congress. He was excused. But it came to my notice about midnight that Chief of National Government in my presidential address, contrary to the prior agreement between me and him, that the issue would not be raised. Number two, he had been attacked by speakers during the debate on the presidential address. Number three, the Congress had decided to proceed with the election of officers contrary to his advice to me on the point. On receiving that report, I sent for Akintola twice to come and see me so that I could give him an explanation on each of the points made by him. Twice, he declined my invitation. My voluntary envoys for this purpose were Shoni, Alfred, that's Mr. Alfred, Shoni is Shoni Bare, Alfred, Mr. Alfred Rwani, and Prince Adedoyin. On his second refusal, I decided to stand. I'll tell that again. On his second refusal, I decided not to stand on my right. I took my garment and went to his chalet. This was about 1:30 a.m. on Sunday, 4th February. I most sincerely appealed to and begged him in the names of, number one, our 22-year-old friendship, which might be adversely affected if he carried out his intention. Number two, of the Action Group to which he all profess loyalty and which would suffer if he left Jos in the prevailing circumstances. Number three, of the masses of the people of would be seriously endangered if he left Jos in his present mood. And number 4, of God. I told him I had no wish to enter into any argument with him at that stage, but wanted to assure him that no one had in the open meeting attacked or criticized him. All I had come to do was to beg him most sincerely not to leave Jos as he had planned. Chief Akinloye was present. He strongly supported my appeal to Chief Akintola. Chief Roshiji was also present but did not utter a word. Chief Eso Shonibare, Alfred Rwani, and Prince Adedoyin, who were with me, did not speak. Chief Akintola spoke briefly. He assured me that he would not leave Jos as planned. That was on 3rd February, Sunday. On 4th February, number 4, 4th February 1962, very early this morning, I asked Prince Adedoyin to go and see if Akintola was still in Jos. He came back and reported rather crisply, but with a touch of humor. Leader, the birds have flown. Chiefs Akintola, Roshiji, and S.A. Tinubu and Messrs. J.O. Adigun and Duro Ogundiran and delegates from Osun and Oyo divisions had left Jos by train at 7 a.m. that morning. At 10 a.m., I and the remaining party leaders and delegates attended a Congress Thanksgiving service at the Methodist Church, Jos. As if the preacher knew what was happening within the AG, the text of his sermon was, "Can two walk together except they be agreed?" Amos 3, verse 3. On 5th April 1962, Chief Akintola and his supporters arrived in Ibadan. They were met at the railway station by ministers, obas, and government officials. The crowd shouted "SLA on top" as Chief S.L. Akintola alighted from the train. Those who shouted "Awo" Agbaje. 6th February 1962, Dr. Akinola Maja, Chief T.A. Odutola, and Olaji Gbadamosi arrived in Jos in a chartered plane to discuss with me issues arising from Akintola's withdrawal from the Congress. It was learnt later in the day that Chief Akintola was to have come with these men to Jos, but he was dissuaded from doing so at the last minute by Oba Sidi Akran and Mrs. Akintola. The withdrawal of SLA from Jos and his refusal to return when appealed to do so by well-meaning Yoruba leaders were regarded by the delegates who remained at the Congress as acts of gross disloyalty and a clear declaration of war against the party. 7th February 1962, Ayo Roshiji's letter of resignation from the post of Federal Secretary of the Action Group and the Secretary's annual reports were rejected by the Congress. A memorandum in which Roshiji had advocated the formation of another political party in place of the Action Group was distributed to the delegates at the Congress. In other words, Roshiji said that he's not doing again. He now put out a document for the formation of a new party in the Congress of Action Group. It is well sharp. What he did, by the way, eventually cost him something in Abeokuta. You know, what they specifically, we'll talk about that later. New officers of the Congress were elected and the Congress adjourned sine die. 8th February 1962. I arrived back in Ibadan. A large crowd turned out to welcome me, but no minister or Oba, other than the Odemo of Ishara, came to welcome me. At the Mokola roundabout, I was booed by some people who congregated there in front of the NCNC branch secretariat. 9th February 1962. A peace meeting. Please, we are getting closer to the cool thing, so please stay with me. 9th February 1962, a peace meeting presided over by the Ooni of Ife, supported by some Obas and chiefs, was held at the VIP Rest House Ibadan. I had insisted that all divisional leaders, ministers, and parliamentary secretaries should be invited to this meeting, in order that they might for once know the truth of the real issues, instead of the lies which Akintola had propagated among many of them. Akintola strongly objected to the presence of these people at the meeting. On my part, I made it clear that I would participate in the meeting only if these people were allowed to attend. After a lot of negotiation, it was agreed by Akintola and I concurred, after a lot of importunities, that only ministers